Chapter 12. When Anmar was not training with the Lhounds and their handlers, she spent every possible moment with Zendra and her puppies in their roomy cubicle that was regularly provided with fresh straw and clean sleeping mats. If Zendra had needed anything more to ensure her complete recovery from the trauma of her recent past, the arrival of her pups provided it. She simply revelled in them and was obviously the most loving of mothers. Anmar could not believe how fast the puppies grew, but then they never seemed to stop feeding. Zendra also ate with a vigorous appetite, and Surgeon Dell insisted on her taking the special nutrient supplement for a full 2 weeks after the puppy's birth. Within days, the puppy's eyes opened, and within 2 weeks they were exploring the cubicle, and even trying to scale the high sill of the doorway to the nursing cubicle. Anmar fell totally in love with them. She had always been enchanted by the Lhound puppies on the breeding station, but these two captured her heart entirely. She loved sitting on one of the sleeping mats, often stroking Zendra's head on her lap, watching them suckle, and later, as they became more boisterous, having them clamber all over her and Zendra while she laughed aloud at their antics, and Zendra purred her contentment. This time that she spent with Zendra and her pups put the final indelible seal on the deep bond of love and loyalty that the woman and the Lhound had formed, to the deeply rewarding enrichment of both their lives. Lhounds and Zand also fell under the puppy's spell. Though the attendants of the nursing section were initially outraged at the presence of a male Lhound, and an exceptionally large one at that, in their sacred domain when Zand in company with Lhounds came to see the puppies, Zand won them over so completely that they would eventually ensure that he also got some of the tasty tidbits that they made a point of giving Zendra because she needed building up. As the puppies grew and became ever more lively and adventurous, it became a common sight to see them clambering over the huge male lionhound, patiently recumbent on the straw in the cubicle, while their relaxed mother enjoyed the brief respite from their energy-sapping attentions. This almost blessed interval continued throughout the rest of the moon of Remos, and well into morn. 6 men and 4 women from the Gordofane militia, under the leadership of Major Harrod Ram, started participating in joint training exercises with the chosen Lhound Regiment members to weld the 2 services into one strong working unit. Dane and Marrox also frequently started training along with the expedition members, as Colonel Malek felt it would be very beneficial for the development of their working relationship. The various medics and surgeons also trained alongside the military staff to get them campaign ready. The Queen tirelessly led virtually every exercise. If she could not be there, Major Tarek and Major Ram took turns leading the training. Lhounds preferred Major Tarek's leadership style. He told himself that this was only because she led by a cheerful though demanding and vigorous example, whereas he felt that Major Ram, an impressive textbook soldier to the inch, imposed his will and drove everybody hard to have the opportunity to show his superiority. It certainly had nothing to do with the fact that Major Tarek was a superb rider, who also happened to be a very beautiful woman. It assuredly had nothing to do with the fact that Zand had revealed that Major Ram was a non-telepath, or Ord, as Zand referred to him. Zand also told Lhounds, "He doesn't like Lhounds, me in particular, and his horse doesn't like him." Most non-telepaths did not feel comfortable with the Lhounds. Deep down this was based on fear, yet some non-telepaths overcame it, to a greater or lesser extent, and managed to work around Lhounds well enough, though they almost invariably avoided close contact with them. Indeed, all the members of the militia contingent were non-telepaths, and Lhounds had no problems with them, nor did the other handlers and their Lhounds. Lhounds hoped that Zand was wrong in thinking that Major Ram disliked him in particular. He found the idea disturbing. He hoped that the Major would not ever make the mistake of targeting Zand. And yet that was exactly what happened. After a brief rest period during a training exercise on a particularly warm day, the Major suddenly called on everybody to get back in the saddle. "Come on, people, we've dawdled long enough. I was not happy at all with the pathetic pace you set this morning." With these words, the Major jumped on his horse, Traveller, a huge and powerful gelding known for his speed and endurance, and rode him straight through a patch of shade where Zand had stretched out to enjoy the coolness. How the Lhound avoided getting trodden on was never clear to Lhounds. What was very clear, though, to everybody, was Major Ram's loudly bellowed, "Keep your lazy animal out of my way, Captain," as he spurred his horse onto the track with a further hectoring command. "Come on, people, move, move!" As everybody scrambled onto their horses, Lhounds hoped that he was the only one who had picked up the wave of incandescent rage that momentarily surged through Zand's mind, before being abruptly blanked off. Lhounds was furiously angry himself. Containing his anger with some difficulty, he mind-called urgently, "Zand, are you all right?" as he ran across to check on the Lound. The response came swiftly, "Zand is all right, but he will not forget." The icy menace in the sending sent an involuntary shiver down Lennard's spine. As he ran calming hands down the Lound's back and sides, he sent even more urgently, "Do not let him make you do anything foolish. He is not worth it." Zand raised implacable eyes to Lennard's. "Zand will not do anything foolish, but Zand will not forget." As Lennard leapt onto Shadow's back, he wondered if Harold Ram had any inkling that he had probably just made one of the worst mistakes of his life. As they finally pulled level with the others, though still well behind the speeding Ram, one of the other handlers leant towards Lennard. "Bloody Ord! Does the bonehead have a death wish?" he snapped, disgustedly shaking his head. Lennard looked at the man and shook his head as well as he replied, "That I do not know, friend, but I do know that I am now going to show him what my lazy animal can do." He touched his heels gently to Shadow's sides. The big mare surged past the other horses, with Zand as usual just keeping slightly ahead of her. Within 2 parsecs, they caught up with a group of 4 riders that had almost managed to draw level with Ram, amongst them Nell and Tarek. She also just shook her head and made a "what can you say" mouth at Lennard, as he and Zand fell in next to them. For a long way they sped along in a group just behind Major Ram. Then, with about 2 parsecs to go, Lennard sent a swift, "We are taking off," to Nellen. The Lound Major gave a grim little smile and the briefest of nods. Gradually Lennard moved Shadow up alongside Ram. He gave the Major a broad smile and shouted convivially and loudly enough for the group behind to hear clearly, "You are absolutely right, sir. This lazy lot needs some proper exercise." He leant forward, gently patted the side of Shadow's neck, and said quietly in the horse's ear, "Come, sweetheart, let's show them something." Eagerly the big mare responded. Within a few strides she had pulled ahead of the Major. Lennard kept her there, knowing full well that she still had a great deal in reserve. Zand maintained his position at her side. Just under half a parsec from home, Lennard lightly tapped Shadow's neck again. The big mare simply took off and flew like an impatient bolt released from a crossbow, and at her side the Lound kept pace, lithe tawny body undulating smoothly, paws barely seeming to skim the ground. During their eventide repast that evening, Lennard, Anmar, and Dane were approached by one of Queen Eruda's aides with the by now familiar request to join her later. They had been telling Dane, who had not participated in that day's training session, about the unfortunate incident during the day. Anmar pointed out that it could so easily have resulted in a serious injury to Zand. And it was completely and utterly unnecessary. Zand wasn't in the way at all. "I will truly never understand what got into the fool of a man," she concluded heatedly. 2 of the other Lound handlers also stopped at their table to express their feelings of outrage at the way in which Major Ram had behaved. As the one man rather extremely put it, "If Zand had ripped his throat out, it would have been no more than the stupid bloody Ord deserved. You just don't mess with a Lound like that." The other handler nodded vehemently, "And man, was I ever delighted that you rode the bastard into the ground like that." Lennard was, however, still deeply perturbed about the matter and its possible impact on the expedition force as a whole, and found that it preyed heavily on his mind. "What bothers me more than almost anything else is the possible motivation for it. I mean, what possessed Ram to in essence attack Zand like that?" he complained to Anmar and Dane. "Surely a man in his position, working in an environment teeming with Lounds, so to speak, should know better. You just do not target a Lound like that. I shudder to think what would have happened if that horse had stepped on Zand. In all sorts of ways it does not bear thinking about." Lennard pushed his plate away. He had not been able to do justice to the beautifully cooked mere trout served that evening. He would have passed it on to Zand, but the Lound had elected to eat in the Lound barracks that evening. This added to Lennard's concern. The normally ebullient Lound had seemed uncharacteristically subdued after the training session. Lennard wondered if he had made the animal overexert himself in what he acknowledged to himself was rather immature settling of scores with Ram. It was therefore with a distinct feeling of relief that he saw Zand, looking like his old self again, already waiting in the Queen's antechamber when they got there after eventide. In fact, the big Lound looked significantly better than his normal old self, with a burnished coat rivaling the gloss and fineness of the highest quality Rickle silk yarn. When Lennard gestured at the Lound's sleek appearance and raised a questioning eyebrow at Zand, the Lound said, "Zand did not feel happy.
so went to be washed and rinsed and dried and brushed, and is feeling better now."
With the words, Zand sent a complex mixture of emotions, starting rather surprisingly with confused hurt that escalated into furious anger, and then finally dissipated into a feeling of calm, overlaying a profound sense of tiredness. Lhounds was deeply touched. He knelt in front of the Lound, put his arms around the big shoulders, and stroked the silken mane and back. "I am sorry that man almost hurt you, and that I cannot do anything about it, but he outranks me." As Zand heaved a deep sigh and allowed the full weight of his big head to rest on the man's shoulder, Lhounds wondered a little despairingly if Zand understood the complexities of military rank, and his inability to deal with Ram's conduct without making a huge issue of it. Possibly the Lound even blamed him for not having taken action against Ram there and then. As these thoughts went through his mind, he momentarily forgot that his mind was still open to the Lound, so he was rather startled when Zand stepped back from him abruptly and fixed him with an unusually gentle gaze from the normally fierce eyes.
Zand does understand, and Zand does not blame Lhounds ever, but Zand does not understand why that man tried to hurt him, and now Zand does not like him at all.
And then, in an abrupt surge of escalated mind energy, as the golden eyes suddenly blazed with almost human awareness, came the menacingly chilling,
"And he does not outrank me."
As Lhounds stood up and looked in some perplexity from the Lound to Anmar, not quite knowing what to say, the door to the Queen's audience chamber opened, and Sergeant Narik came out. "I am sorry, Captain Denarian," he said rather stiffly, "but I felt that I had to report to Queen Neruda about what happened today at training. I am concerned." Lhounds stopped him with a lifted hand. "No need to apologize, Sergeant. I am concerned myself, and would more than likely have spoken about it to the Queen myself." The sergeant looked relieved, saluted, and hurried from the room. At the same time, Queen Neruda's calm, low-pitched voice invited them into her audience chamber as she stood aside in the doorway to allow them to enter. They took their seats while the Queen closed the big double doors and activated the room shields. Zand lay down on the carpet close to Lhounds as Queen Neruda sat down in her usual place next to him on the couch. It was quiet in the beautiful, spacious room for a few long seconds before the Queen spoke in a troubled voice. "I may have made a mistake in including the militia in our expedition. I have had some doubts about Major Ram working with Lounds before, though he is an outstandingly effective soldier in many ways. But it has become a tradition that we mount these joint operations." Lhounds felt a huge wave of relief wash over him. He had been concerned that the Queen might have wondered if Zand had provoked the Major, but it seemed as if she didn't. The Queen sensed this and leant down to stroke the back of Zand's neck. She spoke in almost a tone of wonderment. Such a wonderfully soft and silky creature, and yet so terribly, terribly dangerous too. When she continued, her voice unmistakably held a smile. "And such a wonderfully fast runner too, from what I hear." Lhounds laughed a bit sheepishly. "Yes, I am sorry, Your Highness. I am afraid we did show off a bit. But we were both so angry we had to do something to get it out of our systems. I truly do not know how Zand avoided those big hooves. Major Ram rode full tilt right at him. Zand could have been seriously injured, if not killed." By the time Lhounds stopped speaking, he was so upset that his voice was shaking. The Queen reached out a strong hand and laid it on his forearm in a firm grip. She spoke in an imperative tone. "Relax, my boy, relax. It did not happen. Let it go. Just let it go." At the same time, a calming wave of mind energy washed over him. He leant back against the softly cushioned back of the couch and felt his stress ebbing away. As the last of the tension drained away, leaving him feeling relaxed and indeed comforted, he realized that Anmar had joined the Queen's calming sending. He gave them both a smile and said to Dane, "Two extraordinarily good women to have on one side, Dane. With all respect, Your Highness," he added hastily. The Queen bowed her head. "Compliments sincerely appreciated and happily accepted, Lhounds," she smiled. "Likewise," Anmar added. "After your and Zand's fraught day," Queen Neruda continued, "I think we will omit our space bender training tonight. I was toying with the idea of trying that last one tonight, but not after the day you have had. Instead, I think I shall ask Petros to serve us some hot malt with cinnamon and whatever cake or sweet confection they have in the kitchens. But first, I have to ask you to share your impressions of today with me. Possibly I can pick up some indication as to why Major Ram behaved the way he did. So just lean back and relax and open your minds, please." As Lhounds, Anmar, and Zand did so, the Queen's mind courteously came into theirs as they all summoned up their impressions of the incident that day. After a few long moments, the Queen's powerful mind withdrew from theirs. She looked mystified as she leant back against the couch as well. Well, it obviously did happen completely unexpectedly, just as Sergeant Marie kept telling me. I find it hard to understand, and I could see clearly that neither of you have had any previous problems with Major Ram, she said to Zand and Lhounds. I also don't understand how you escaped being trodden on, Zand, she concluded with evident concern. Zand lifted his head.
Zand just jumped very, very fast, Your Highness,
he said. And I am very, very glad that you did, Queen Eruda responded. She leaned forward and stroked the top of his head again. She stood up and deactivated the room shields. Shortly thereafter, Petros opened the door. Good evening, Your Highness. May I bring you and your guests something? Yes, please, Petros, the Queen responded. May we have some hot malt, plenty of cinnamon, please, and some of whatever delicious pastry creation Mistress Zand conjured up today. And would you see if there is something that a hungry little Lound might enjoy? The Queen concluded. I shall investigate, ma'am, Petros assured her and withdrew. Zand signalled his approval of the latter part of her request with a hearty thump of his bushy tail on the carpet. For the next hour the Queen subtly set out to get them all to relax and put the upsetting day behind them. The hot malt was delicious, as was the lime-curd pie with its whipped cream and mallow topping. Zand disposed of the large trout that Petros brought him in very short order. He then went through a truncated version of his post-feeding face and paw-cleaning ritual before stretching out at full length on his side and promptly going to sleep. Anmar collected all their used crockery and put everything neatly on the tray. And then the Queen just got them to talk about easy trivialities, their favourite dishes, whether they preferred harp music to the lyre, the play performed a few evenings before in the Palace Playhouse by some travelling dramatic players, how the weaning and part-time fostering of Zendra's puppies was progressing. Anmar told them that Zendra had already started low-level training with her and Nightwind in the Palace Riding Park. She is actually in remarkably good condition already, Anmar reported proudly. Finally, the Queen gestured at the long length of the Lound sleeping so soundly on the carpet, and said musingly, Do you not find it almost miraculous that these amazing creatures have, of their own free will, chosen to make their lives with us? They do not need us. Oh, certainly, we make their lives marginally easier than the lives of the wild Lounds that still live in the mountains by feeding them and giving them comfortable quarters to sleep in. But in return, we ask them to give up their freedom, live their lives according to our structured rules, protect us, work very hard for us, face danger for us, give us their unquestioned loyalty, love, and companionship. We even ask them to die for us on occasion. And they do it all gladly and willingly, and in doing so enrich our lives immeasurably. And rarely, very, very rarely, if in fact ever, a lion hound like Zand comes along, who is so far beyond the everyday norm that it is an incredible privilege to know him and to associate with him. And then, abruptly, something startling happened. Suddenly, Queen Eruda sat forward in her seat, her relaxed posture completely gone. And then we are stupid enough, criminally, insanely stupid enough, to try and run him down with the iron-shod hooves of our heavy, powerful, combat-trained horses. For the first time, in all the time that they had known the Queen, they heard raw anger in her voice. This is very reprehensible of me, she continued with a clear loss of control. I should not be criticizing a senior officer in front of 2 junior officers and a civilian, but I am just so angry about it. The more I think about it and talk about it, the angrier I become. And I feel responsible. I am, after all, the man's commanding officer. What on earth would I have done if Zand had been killed? What on earth would I, could I, in fact, have said to you, Lhounds? The Queen was sitting rigidly, clearly deeply upset, and obviously becoming more so, much to her own appalled consternation. After a quick look at Anmar, Lhounds slipped down on one knee in front of her and gently took her clenched fists in both his hands. Ma'am, he said, please forgive my presumption, but to quote you yourself from earlier, it did not happen. It did not happen. Zand is fine, and we should let it go. Slowly the stormy grey eyes, almost glaring into Lhounds' eyes, softened, as did the clenched hands cradled in his. Lhounds released the Queen's hands and moved back to his seat, but still with concern clearly written on his face. The Queen rubbed her forehead vigorously with her fingers, then let her hands fall rather heavily into her lap. I really have to apologize for this disgraceful exhibition, she began, but all 3 young people shook their heads so emphatically that she fell silent. Lhounds spoke for them all when he said, Oh no, Your Highness, no apology needed, ma'am. We cannot even begin to comprehend the responsibilities that you bear with such grace and composure every day of your life. We are hugely privileged to have been permitted to work so closely with your Highness over the past moons. So absolutely no apology needed, your Highness. Not ever. Not with us." Leonard's voice held complete conviction and sincerity. Queen Eruda's glance moved from one earnest young face to the next. "Thank you," she said simply. Later that evening in their quarters, when they were all settling down for the night and Zand was stretched out on his pallet, Leonard said, "Boy, but you could sleep heavily sometimes. You slept like a granite boulder all evening after you'd eaten that trout." Zand lifted his head and blinked serene golden eyes at Leonard.
Zand was not asleep all the time, but Zand did not think it would be good manners to wake up while the Queen was so upset.
"Ah," Leonard said, and turned down the reading globe to the merest glow. In the near dark, he walked over to Zand's pallet and patted the big shoulder, rock hard under the silky fall of May. "Zand is a very good and clever lion-hound," he might say gently.
"Zand knows,"
came the characteristic response. Leonard chuckled quietly and got into bed.